right, we're just gonna give it a few seconds for people to populate Facebook Live and YouTube, and we'll get started. What's up, 357? Hey, Marlena. All right. You ready?
Right now is the time for action. That's why USAA
okay.
is giving payment relief options to eligible members.
Dave, what's up, man? I need some good veggies too. The carnivores are buying up the vegan stuff now since they didn't went up on the meats. Okay, our first question is from Erica. What Green Party candidate should we get behind? The thing with the Green Party is they have a uniform platform. So you don't really, when you have a small third party, they're kind of like a central issue party. So if you look back at like Ralph Nader or Jill Stein or any Green Party presidential or even congressional candidates, you'll notice they have a singular platform. So to answer your question in terms of which Green Party, it doesn't matter which Green Party candidate you vote for, because when you have an issue-centric party with not much divergence, like they're very locked into their platform of sustainability and social welfare investment and breaking down the corporate culture and overcoming the monopolies and things of that nature. So to be honest with you, when you're voting green, it's kind of the easiest thing to do because it's a kind of like a universal party. It's like trying to determine, not that they're the same, but like Nazis. All the Nazi was a political party, the Chinese Communist Party or the Bolshevik Party. It's every candidate, in order to be a candidate for that party, you have to agree to advance their platform in general. So it doesn't matter. If you're voting green, you're voting for the green platform, not really for the green politicians. The politicians are there to advance the platform. So I'm going to be voting green presidential and probably green down the line. But the unfortunate thing is often cities and states and locales don't have candidates. Like the last major election, the only green candidate we had some water reclamation green candidates, but we only had one green. Scott Summers was a congressional green candidate, but there was no presidential, there was no green mayoral candidate, and on down the line. So that's the unfortunate thing. But hey, no problem. So moving on. Andy Williams asked, can I elaborate on infantilization? A couple of years ago, there was this, up till now, but there was this big debate about black men being effeminized and black men showing up on dresses. And Dave Chappelle got on and did an interview with Oprah and said how he was intimidated, or they tried to coerce him into wearing a dress. And every famous black man has to wear a dress. And they had black men, Terry Crews, in promotion for the Expendables movie, at the premiere, took off his muscle shirt and had on a bra. And so there was a lot of hysteria about they're trying to effeminize black men. They're trying to castrate black men. And you know, if we want to be accurate, Dave Chappelle totally wore a dress. Go look at Robin Hood Men in Tights. He had worn a dress before. I don't know why. You know, and they said that, you know, he made $80 million and never had to wear a dress. I don't think he ever had to wear a dress, but he did wear the dress just for accuracy's sake. But that aside, and you know, in Malamu Baruti's book, The Effeminization of Black Males, I mean, y'all gave Umar $500,000, and they said as much as $750,000 to open a school for the express purpose to stop the agenda to effeminize black men. So I looked into this whole effeminizing black men thing and concluded that black men are not being systematically effeminized. We're being systematically infantilized. And infantilization means to keep in a state of childhood or childishness. And when you look at the elements of childhood when it relates to adults, because they also used to call Trump, said that he acts like a child, that he threw tantrums like a child. So some child psychologists came out and said, well, we shouldn't call sociopaths or psychopaths children because children are not psychopaths and children have innate characteristics that adults lack that are very beneficial, like they have high levels of empathy and care. I don't know if there was a video going around of they bought this child a Spider-Man pinata and they wanted him to beat the pinata with the stick for the candy, and the child didn't want to hit it because the child felt like he didn't want to harm the Spider-Man figure. And when they took the stick away, he hugged the Spider-Man pinata because he didn't want to beat it. And there's another viral video from a few years ago of a child whose mother had chopped a head off a fish, and the child wanted to put the fish back together and put the fish in the ocean. So children have qualities that are very, 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 I don't know if you would say admirable. So to call an adult that acts like a sociopath or a psychopath a child is actually inaccurate. So, but that aside, keeping that in mind, when you say that black men are kept in a state of infantilization, there are certain qualities to childhood that black men are held within due to racism and white domination and oppression. And one of those qualities of child, not necessarily inherently negative, but they are not beneficial for adults, is control. You know, my son is an adult almost, but you know, when he said he wanted to go out during quarantine, I'm like, nah, dead that you're not going anywhere. And you know, he has to do certain chores and he has to look to us, even though he's fully capable. He can do most things any adult can do. He still has to check with his mother and I before he moves on certain things. And we have great influence over many decisions of his life. Well, black men, in terms of determining on a societal level, in terms of a nationalist level, we don't have that independent power. We don't have that ability to make decisions without doing it without the permission, without the approval of the systems and institutions of white domination. Another thing where they talk about, and again, but I'll just say it, the notions of, there was a video of some ball chaser, some professional basketball player, and he was doing a cautionary video, and he was telling black children or young black males not to have multiple mothers. He had 5 baby mamas, and he said, you know, 2 of them were cooperating with him, while the other children were kept away from him by the bad, evil baby mamas. And he was given this wisdom that you shouldn't have children by multiple women because it's a mistake, it's a drain on your money. And he said he spent millions. And as he was saying this man had to be in his late 40s, early 50s. There was a wall full of sneakers, all the way as far as the eye could see, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of sneakers. And to me, like, you're a grown ass man, you know, and you're no longer chasing balls professionally. And even if you're a professional ball chaser, you know, those desires, like Amos Wilson said, we claim that we're free and we're independent. But how come the expression or the exercise of that freedom and independence just coincidentally happens to align with everything our oppressors want us to do in terms of our consumption, in terms of our diet, in terms of our desires? So that's another thing, and it's a sensitive thing because you don't want to be respectability politics. But if you see the average black male in the United States, whom I'm primarily talking about, obsession with childish shit, from sports to sneakers. I went to this Hyde Park Beer Fest, and it was 90% black people. And the black men were there with their cigars and their beers, and they were literally chest puffed out, pretending to be big men, men of big affairs. And they were literally in real time acting out. It was like boss cosplay. Like, I'm a boss. How a boss do? Bosses smoke cigars. Bosses wear fly ass clothes. Bosses have diamonds in their watches, wear Rolexes, and drive big cars. Boss hog, drive fat Cadillac. But they never get to the point of bosses construct societies. Bosses make intricate plans and construct and operate bureaucracies and institutions. Bosses identify enemies and systematically destroy their enemies without remorse. And I don't mean co-workers who are trying to get a promotion over you. I mean whole other nations, whole other entities that oppose you, where we don't see black men engaged in these activities. The best that you see black men do, trying to carry the favor of white men and white institutions so that they can make big money, sign big contracts, and do big things, but all within the scope that white people allow. So even Michael Jordan, Michael Jordan is a billionaire. How much infrastructure does he control? Nike has factories, they have shipping infrastructure, they have intellectual property for maximum production and distribution of a worldwide global distribution, storage, marketing network. How much of that does Jordan control besides sticking his name on it and getting a check written for him? So even though he's the man, he's the face, he's a billionaire, he's got all the money to give that little white woman he married everything she desires, how much does he control in terms of institutional power? So that's an infantile state of being. And we're so worried about, oh, they're going to make us wear a skirt, or should boys wear pink, or what Dwayne Wade's doing with his child, his gender dysphoric child. We're worried about effeminization instead of what the real problem is that, and even forget, if we ain't trying to run in behind the Europeans, then we want to be Arab, Moors. Remember, some of y'all around my age, but remember, what was Dwayne Wade was a brilliant, genius black man, and his highest aspiration was to work for Konnichiwa Industries. So all that, and I'm seeing today, and I'm seeing now all over social media, these young people graduating with honors, with 5.0 GPAs, getting accepted into all these schools. And the best we can figure out to do with our most brilliant black minds is jockey for them to get into the best white institutions. Cambridge, Rhodes Scholars, Harvard, so I think we're in an infantile state because we don't control the resources and institutions required for us to live a life. And what's more infantile than that is we don't even have the fucking desire to. And we worried about whether or not black men could wear a skirt. Most Def comes on the internet with a dress on, with some traditional African garb, and we fighting about black men in dresses instead of fighting to black men who lack any real power, who can't bring hell to our enemies and oppressors. So that's why I say our real problem is infantilization. If we had to talk about it in those terms, which I don't even like couching the discussions in those terms, because it's, you're always going to find exceptions to the rules and rules to the exceptions. But that's why I think if we want to be hysterical or up in arms about the status of black men or what conspiracy is being imposed on black men that's not being imposed on black women per se, I would say infantilization, subordinate of perpetual subordinate. I mean, the brother that just got murdered in Minneapolis was a lawyer, so it doesn't matter. The brother who got cursed out and that white woman tried to have murdered in Central Park. He'd worked for Marvel, one of the biggest companies in the world. He was highly educated, so well articulate, and out watching birds. You know how, kind of pedigree of a Negro you have to be out naming and classifying birds? What kind of black man got time for that? So this is a brother, high pedigree black man, still treated like garbage. So we're still in an infantile state. So that's what I meant by black men. And also you can read Dr. Naeem Akbar, Visions for Black Men. There's a whole nother element to this where he talks about the cognitive, psychological, psycho-emotional development of a black man, where you go from being a male, which is your genitals, to being a boy, which is being a male who has some ability to manipulate and extract what you want from your parents or from those around you, to being from a male to boy to man being able to not just extract from your environment to make contributions and construct and sustain and protect your environment. Then he had another level above that, which you could say God man or Asar or Sahu or Ra, just some whatever African term he had for it, where you're not only uh, a male, a boy, and a man, but one who can extrapolate the role and responsibilities of a man across generations, across societies, across the seas, on a global scale, where you are in service to your people from the past generations, from your ancestors to your descendants. You are working to preserve and clear a path for them. So and we're doing a book review this week. We'll be doing our second book review, Dale Jones, Culture Bandits, Annihilation of African Images. If you're not a subscriber to the YouTube page, you can go there for the first. We're doing the first 3 Dale Jones books. Then I was going to do all the Dale Jones books, but somebody borrowed one of my Dale Jones books. But I'm not going to get into that. So we'll be doing that soon. But also I want to do probably do like 3 of Dr. Akbar's books in like Visions for Black Men, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery, and I don't know. So maybe we'll start doing series, like do 2 or 3 books per author, or jump around, however y'all want to get down. Okay, let's move on. But yeah, I hope I clarified that. And I also did an entire, if you search the Diallo Kenyatta archives from the Bro.Diallo show, or this image is terrible. I don't have anything to wipe it with, but this camera image looks terrible. What to do? I got some better camera equipment. I got some lenses from Chauncey. So the next Bro.Diallo setup will be much better, but this is kind of on the fly. But next time, watch, I'm going to blow your minds with the quality and the high-tech nature of the Bro.Diallo live broadcast. Just give me time. Y'all got to work with me. I'm a struggler. If it ain't struggle, it ain't me. Anyway, let's go on to the next question. Somebody asked about the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street. My criticisms of the Tea Party is this some old redneck hillbilly cracker bullshit. But the real criticism of the Tea Party is the Tea Party was a case study in mass manipulation. Black people, we tend to think we're the only people when we talk about brainwashing and the system controlling our minds. White folks are more controlled and more brainwashed and more detached from reality than black people. But the reason we don't recognize how much more brainwashed they are than us is because they suffer to a lesser degree for their delusions. So if you're a black man or a black woman walking these streets with delusions about who you are and your status and your ability, you will end up dead, if not homeless and institutionalized. Whereas a white person with grand delusions and a fucked up mindset can go to the White House, can grab pussy all the way to the White House and be billionaires. So the reason we fail to recognize is because oftentimes we associate negative outcomes with being brainwashed and indoctrinated. And so if somebody has positive outcomes, which I don't really define as positive, but we look at it as positive, like wealth, personal helicopter and private jet, we think, well, this person must be a thinker or whatever. But so the Tea Party was the Koch brothers and other billionaire white elites who took the outrage and insecurity that the white masses felt from having a black token in the White House and mobilized that to number one, the purpose of the Tea Party was put the final death knell in the socialist reforms of the. Let me just stop this. Sorry, I don't know why I got these commercials. Anyway, was a conspiracy to destroy what was left, which the last remnants of the New Deal, and that's how white people became a middle class. Before the New Deal, the FDR New Deal, the United States was a third world country. What makes a third world country is its economy is set up exclusively for extraction. And when you have an economy set up exclusively for the extraction of wealth, the wealth concentrate where you have a high upper class of elites and a masses of the poor, and no real middle class and no real voice for the lower class. That's the status of the United States. It was called the Gilded Age. where the vast majority of whites were poor, undereducated, underhoused, and with the billionaire elites, Rockefellers, Bilderbergs, all that. Y'all like to act like these Rockefeller people, Illuminati, got magical powers, but it ain't nothing but parasitic theft. And so FDR, white people did not become a middle class society through hard work. They became middle class through welfare and government handouts. So anyway, the elites have been fighting against the New Deal since the 40s. Reagan was the first successful post-New Deal politician to really give a blow. He fucked up the labor unions and some other shit. And white people voted for this because the rich whites told the middle class whites that you're middle class through hard work. They told them you're middle class through hard work, and the government is in your way, and you became middle class through your own hard work. And the reason you can't go from middle class to wealth is because the government regulations is in your way. And white folks fell for it. So they saw Obama's election as an opportunity to put the last death nail into FDR New Deal politics and to reinforce and make sure that you could never have a New Deal. You can never have mass social reform. They wanted to, as the conservative right said, they wanted to shrink government to the level where it could be drowned in a bathtub. They wanted to do away with government. They didn't want to do away with repression. They wanted to privatize repression, private prisons, private security forces, private surveillance. So when a black man says down with the government, he's talking about down with repression. When white folks say down with the government, they're talking about privatizing repression and even increasing repression to the extent that government Social Security and other government handouts and government welfare policies and government regulations allows for set-asides and affirmative actions and all those things that used to be positive, and now they even trick black folks into thinking it's negative. So that's what the Tea Party was about. But the white folks, again, I hate to toot my own horn, but you go to the Diallo Kenyatta YouTube, and I have a series called You Can't Eat Racism. You Can't Eat Racism, and how racism, well, there's several white scholars that write books about this too, but how white people, as Dale Jones say, shoot their ass, and you shoot your ass in the foot. Is a kind of mixture of two phrases. But so that's the Tea Party. It was a grand hustle on poor and working class white folks. It was a magnificent, eloquent, it was a wonderful pimp. I mean, you got all these black men in fur hats talking about they pimps. No, white men in tailored suits are the real pimps. And white people are so pathologically insecure and egotistical that they are even realize, damn, we got fucked. And instead of climbing out of that hole, they went deeper with Trump. But I digress. And then, but what they also do, what white people do, Winston Churchill said, you can always depend on Americans to do the right thing once they have exhausted all other options, which is Winston Churchill was a genocidal colonizer, but I mean, that's just eloquent. You can always depend on Americans to do the right thing once they've exhausted all options, which means once they've done all, or I'd say, my quote, white folks aren't content with doing things the wrong way. They want to do things the absolute worst way. So now that the white folks dug themselves in the hole by being pimped by their elites, now all the problems that are a byproduct of them voting against their own economic interests, they're blaming. So they blame blacks. They blame immigrants. They blame terrorists. They blame the New World Order Illuminati. And they blaming all. So eventually, after we're all dead and the race war and the genocide, after all that, white folks will finally bring out the guillotines and have their French Revolution, or their Inquisition. So eventually they'll turn around and want to go and lynch their elites. But then they got the left wing elites and the right wing of elites. So they want to kill Soros. When George Soros, when they're celebrating Trump, when Trump is doing more to hurt them than Soros, but it's a mess. It's a white mess. I mean, the Tea Party don't deserve all that. It's a mess. As far as Occupy Wall Street, I participated in many Occupy Wall Street events because, and then the offshoot, there was the Occupy the Hood. Shout out to Kofi. We did this is so long ago. We did Occupy the Hood, and then I broke off from Occupy the Hood and did Occupy the Lot, where we went around to abandoned areas and set up food, just guerrilla gardening in abandoned lots, because I got tired of hanging around downtown with white liberals and white anarchists and white socialists. But the problem with Occupy the Hood is that you can't fight an organized, entrenched enemy with a loosely the 99% and the 1%. That was great marketing, great branding, but they had two problems. They had no real agenda. They never really coordinated with each other. They didn't deal with a lot of internal problems. Like in those Occupy encampments, there was a lot of rape. There was rape and sexual assaults going on, and nobody wanted to talk about, just like in the black movements, nobody wants to, like, if you talk about the problems of the oppressed, that oppressed people attacking other oppressed people, then you delegitimize the movement. Like elites can rape other elites and rape their children, and nobody says, well, that delegitimizes the elites. But if a movement has those issues and you bring it to the surface, they pretend like, but anyway, there's a lot of issues, but the Occupy movement did give us was the first return for white people to a class analysis, which is what they are sorely lacking. Class consciousness and class analysis. That was the one good thing that came about it. But when you rally people together, let's say tomorrow I got enough clout, some viral thing happened, and I got enough clout where I can get 1,000 black folks to stand next to me in Washington Park. That's step one. And then I'm like, we're all here, we're together, and we all unified for this cause. And you got to have a step 2, step 3, step 4, just occupying a space. And it wasn't a real occupation, because when you go, if you came down there with me, downtown Chicago, we weren't obstructing traffic. We weren't obstructing business. We weren't disrupting any of the operations. We had a presence, and people downtown, when I'm down there like an idiot, the people working in the big skyscrapers and high rises would walk down on their lunchtime and look at us like we were an exhibit. And it was mad interesting. You had feminists there with their chants. You had the Socialist Party. You had the Democratic Socialists. You had the U.S. Communist Party and their literature. You had anarchists, anarcho-socialists, anarcho-capitalists. You had all these really interesting things. It was a leftist radical zoo. And it's just a spectacle. But there was no substance, and there was no agenda, and there was no hierarchy or structure, and there were no specifically targeted entities. So, but like I said, it was a drip in the bucket towards returning the white majority to a class consciousness. So a lot of white people that went through that, as they age and think back on that, will have at least some population of white youth growing up with some level of class awareness, which is a good thing. Moving on. What do I think of blackness gatekeepers all over YouTube and Twitter who want to use blood quantums and eugenics to say that black folks mixed with other bloodlines are not black? I wouldn't call them gatekeepers, or because they don't have any real power or authority. And I don't like just throwing these. They want to be gatekeepers, but unless they have enforcement ability, like there was a time where, like, left gatekeepers, there are leftist gatekeepers in the white left. Meaning that if you are like, let's take, for example, Amy Goodman. Amy Goodman of Democracy Now! Is a left gatekeeper. Meaning that she can launch a leftist or she can bury one. So you take Amy Goodman and Michael Moore, and they come together and they can launch you. You look at activists and movements, and she's a gatekeeper. And there are a lot of people on the left that Amy Goodman won't touch with a 10-foot pole because for reasons, because she gets fundings from George Soros. But that's a whole nother thing. She's a real gatekeeper. So there are leftist gatekeeper. We already know about the mainstream gatekeepers, the corporate media, the employers. So these fringe black people who have fringe views, not true gatekeepers. You can call them extremists. You can call them, rabble rousers. You can call them, but they're not true. And just to give them that title, because it's not going to change. There's no institutions, there's no infrastructure, there are no body of people that they have control over. So there are people with extremist opinions. The issue about who's black and who isn't, the thing about that is race is fiction. So if you're dealing with who's black and who isn't, as African people who are oppressed based on our phenotype, we can redefine and manipulate what is black and what isn't black. We can change black according to where we are and where we are not. My position on black folks is in the West is if you are a black person, and if it was the year instead of 2020, 1820, and then you would have been subjected to chattel slavery, then you're a black person in this context. What does that mean? You, black people who were of mixed lineage, were still slaves. And you can maybe say, well, those slaves got better treatment. Those slaves got this and that. Yes, there was quite a bit of diversity. It wasn't just skin color diversity. The skilled slaves, there were slaves who didn't just pick cotton. There were carpenters and slaves or enslaved Africans who had architectural skills. There were slave athletes. There's the book, The $40 Million Slaves, talks about the prize champions, the prize breeders. So there were all kind of characteristics that you could have as an African under chattel slavery that would have awarded you benefits that other Africans didn't have. So if you're going to say, well, the light skin or mixed race, they were given preferential treatment under white domination, so we're going to exclude them, then you have to exclude the black athletes, the rich black folks, black folks that the reverend class, the blacks who were willing to indoctrinate other blacks into the white man's religion. So there were all kind of blacks, regardless of skin tone. So that's my criteria. But I also agree with Neely Fuller, where he said, if you're an oppressed person, because you have nothing else, you have the ability of self-definition. So you could be a blue black person, and you say, I ain't black, then you're not black. And whatever consequences you suffer, whatever group classification you give yourself, that's who you suffer with, that's who you fight with. I have two cousins who have my uncle, who is black, and their mother, who is white. One of those cousins says, I'm not black, I'm biracial. So he's not black, he's biracial. The other cousin says, I'm black. So that cousin is black. It's not a complex. I don't know why we have to fight about it. I mean, crackers don't have no confusion. It's like Bobby E. Wright said, this thing about who's black and who's not is really stupid, because you line up 1 million people and a white racist can come and tell you who's black and who isn't. But you line up and he's like, and I can tell you too. It's a phenotype. So it's a really simple thing. I don't know why we're fighting about it. We've had blue black people with black skin and the strongest African phenotype to be sellout Uncle Toms. And we've had people of mixed heritage, like from Bob Marley to Malcolm X, who was a redhead, high yellow brother. So it's a state of being. It's a culture, it's a heritage, it's a phenotype. It's a merger of many things that come together. And so to me, a black person is a person that has those characteristics that I just listed and seeks to make a positive contribution to the just aspiration of our people. And as far as the eugenicists and stuff, they are adopting a Western pathological element. And I see a lot of black people adopting eugenicist thing, but ain't nothing white folks pull out there behind it. You won't find a population of black people getting into. So we got black libertarians, black eugenicists, black evangelicals, black Mormons, and Jehovah's Witnesses. Religions that said black folks didn't have souls. So I'm not surprised that we have these black people with these obscene ideologies and viewpoints, but we don't have to give them as much power. I do think we should expose them. We should engage with them. So as they work to build a platform, as they work to try to build up, we just keep snatching bricks out from under that platform, which isn't hard to do, because once they start running their mouth, most sane people can see right through it. So moving on. Danielle asks, what do you think about the idea that Pan-Africanism as political movement is a fraud, and what we should focus on is cultural and tribal connections to Africa? That's like saying veganism is a fraud and what we should focus on is eating a plant-based diet. That's just a semantical game. No, Pan-Africanism isn't a fraud. Pan-Africanism is not a lost cause. And don't take my word for it. Don't listen to any black person or Pan-Africanist. Look at the oppressor. Look at the various movements that have most excited our oppressor. Which movements have white folks allowed to fester in the background and go on and on and on? And which movements do white people mobilize to destroy every time there's any kindling of it coming up? And that'll tell you which movements are more viable or more of a threat to the oppressor. Farrakhan, Nation of Islam, and all these other black cults been running around talking about the white man's the devil, arm yourself, and gutter religion. They've been talking some of the most flammable rhetoric. That's why so many people respect Farrakhan, because they was like, what kind of black man can get on the white man's TV and call the white man a devil? Their minds are blown. But the white man isn't threatened by that. Even these black gun clubs. We got all these black people, yo, arm yourself, black folks all over the internet with guns. That doesn't threaten them. Malcolm X was not a Pan-Africanist. In fact, the cult, the Nation of Islam, was an anti-African cult. They said that black people became savage, and before we fell into a savage state, before we abandoned Islam, our hair was as soft as the skin on our eyebrows, and we have nappy hair. And even Malcolm pushed this. So they were anti-African, even though they bastardized Elijah Muhammad bastardized a lot of Garvey's teaching and took Garvey's teaching from being a political movement to a cult. You'll see that they never touched Malcolm. Malcolm went around and said, kill the white man's dog. He said, if the white man sick a dog on you, kill that dog. White man didn't touch him, didn't move against him, or didn't tell his agents within the nation to move against him. But as soon as Malcolm said, this religion shit, keep it in the closet. This ain't about religion. He said, this is a political movement, and it needs to be secular, and it needs to be international. It needs to be secular, and it needs to be international. When Malcolm sat with Africans, when Malcolm X sat with Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists like Dr. Clark and started learning and abandoned the exclusive cult and joined the Pan-African movement, that's when he became a threat. That's when he became a threat. Look at W.E.B. Du Bois versus Marcus Garvey. Garvey was a Pan-Africanist. Du Bois was an integrationist. Du Bois wanted to go to Harvard and wear top hats and monocles. Garvey said, we going home. Who did they subvert? And who did they fund? And eventually, Du Bois became a communist and fell out of favor. But when they were contemporaries, so our oppressors are threatened. Every time there's some move to an African union, look at every single toppled African leader. You have African leaders committing genocide. You have African leaders like Mugabe who march around talking about Tony Blair is a sissy, and if a white man, and I'll do this to a white man, and I'll do that to a white man. Talking big shit all over the continent of Africa. And they'll be in power for 30 years talking slick to white folks. But the moment they move, look at every toppled African leader, every subverted African movement. They have been Pan-African movements, almost without exception. So if you think Pan-Africanism is a pipe dream or illegitimate, the oppressor doesn't. He's scared as shit of it. So we just need to make Pan-Africanism more adaptable. We need to make it more adaptable. We need to perfect the execution of it and more deeply radicalize it. And as far as cultural, it's holistic. It's not just political. And I have no issues with tribes. I have great issues with tribalism. It's people before tribe. So the African liberation struggle, whatever culture, whatever support, whatever wisdom and insights that come from your tribe and your ethnic group and your traditions, you're supposed to take that and funnel it into the larger African world struggle. You're not supposed to hold on to it and grasp it and try to elevate your tribe above the collective, the global collective. Tribalism is obsolete. It hurts us. That's why, the Kikuyus killing fucking Luos in Kenya and the goddamn South Africans lynching Zimbabweans and Yorubas from Nigeria in the streets of South Africa or in Zania. That's tribalism. It's no good. It's obsolete and doesn't serve us. Embrace your tribe. Carry forth your tribal traditions. But do it to the betterment of the collective, not to your isolation from the larger collective. Where are we going? Chris asked 2 questions. Why do people mistake individualism for freedom? And how do we keep revolutionary ideas and movements from being co-opted by liberals? People mistake individualism for freedom because the oppressor, which I was reading in this book, which we're going to do a report. Look for the Culture Madness. But Dale Jones says that capitalism and white domination is highly adaptable. We tend to think, what is racism? It's just a white man that don't like black people. But capitalism and the systems of racism will embrace blacks to sustain itself and to further its agendas. So we traded liberation for consumption. Individualism puts you in a position of raising your consumption capacity. Oprah, Diddy, Michael Jordan have no more status or power or freedom than me. They just have a higher consumption capacity. But they're just as vulnerable as I am. Physically and culturally. Same LeBron James' 15-year-old son just came out and said, I don't like black girls. I like Hispanic and white girls or whatever. He said Asian women. And all these rich folks, Tavis Smiley said, I don't like black girls. I prefer Latinas, i.e. white looking like, because Latina can be a black woman, blue. But I digress. So individualism does 2 things. It puts you in a better position to carry favor with the oppressor, which will give back to you greater reward. And it also relieves you of your obligation to the collective. So as the collective can go, like Oprah and all them, they can see us fall deeper and deeper into poverty and despair, but they can rise as individuals. We can't collectively rise without a revolution, but you can individually rise by submitting to the oppressor and the oppressive systems and way of going about things. So it's an easier route. It's in the short term, it's more rewarding. But like I said, who wants to make $1 billion and then turn around and have your son look at you and be like, I don't want somebody that's a reflection of you and my mother. I mean, just Google somebody like Eartha Kitt or Diana Ross or what's his name, James Earl Jones, and look at these magnificent giants of black culture and community. And in 2 generations, they're white. Scarface, because all of Scarface, the legendary gangster rapper, said, it's going to become a time because all of my children and grandchildren are with white people. So there's going to come a time where they're going to look at this, be in our home, be in a mansion somewhere, and look at this picture, this portrait of a black man, and say, Papa, Father, who is that black man on the wall? And they were like, that's our great ancestor. It's like, but he's a nigger. And he thought that he said this on if you need to look it up, it was on Ed Lover's radio show, his Sirius FM radio show. Just look up his show archives when he interviewed Scarface a couple of years ago. So that's the price you pay for individualism. Individualism is a path to erasure, is a path to obsolescence. But it'll be a comfortable path. You can follow that path to extinction in the most plush car, in the nicest clothes and finest jewelry, but it's a path to extinction. But it's you can separate. You can be like, oh, look at them niggas doing that, and look at them niggas suffering, look at them niggas this and that. So that's why people choose individualism. Individualism is essentially a selfishness. It's a surrender. Or as I put it, where you have a lot of people like, I do me, I don't give a fuck. That I don't give a fuck, individualistic, is a coward's method of coping with oppression. Individualism is a coward's method of coping with collective oppression. And what was the second part to that question? Sorry. And how do we keep revolutionary? Well, the way you keep your revolutionary movement and the revolutionary fervor from eroding is you have to, revolution is a turning. You need momentum. You have to keep momentum. You have to prioritize. A lot of times when revolutions get going and you're in the streets and you're doing this activity thing and more people are like the Black Panthers. He said initially when the Panthers were founded, there was a whole book series. Before you got your gun, before you got assigned to the food program or the defense or the follow police, there was education. Fred Hampton in Chicago and Oakland, there was education. People had to be educated. There was a book list. Before they gave you guns, they gave you books. But a lot of times when the momentum gets going and the people in the streets and all that, they don't have time for ongoing education. They don't have time to reinforce the values and the principles. That's what happens. So you need ongoing discourse, ongoing intellectual, cultural, and social development. Another thing that the revolution loses is its cultural elements. Like when you're in the streets fighting, when you're struggling day to day, people forget to dance. They forget to love each other. There was one of the Talmud Tigers. If you read a book called Gorillas, there was a woman called, and I mean, it's in the book. Her name was Miss Fuck Fuck. And whenever they went out into to do a guerrilla action, whichever one of the guerrillas killed the most enemy soldiers, she would allow that guerrilla into the tent, into their guerrilla camp to sleep with her for the night. And everybody wanted to be that guy. But we forget the human elements a lot of times. So people try to find other ways. So, or as Emma Goodman said, I don't want to be part of a revolution that won't allow me to dance. So you need ongoing education. You need to speak to the human needs for companionship, for love, for fuckery. You know, that's why when we were working with the Bloom Cooperative, we had chess tournaments and game nights and concerts. We had a lot of cultural things. So the reason what you do is to sustain the revolutionary fervor and quit your revolution from becoming liberal is to do ongoing education, ongoing cultural and social enrichment of the revolutionaries and participants, and never become content with one or two victories. Oh, we got this property, we got this farm, we got this concession from the you can never be content. So those are the ways you can prevent it, and always being self-critical and having regular transference of power. No leadership for life or permanent leadership. Every leader should have at least a half dozen young people that are being groomed to take his place, and the leader doesn't pick his replacements. The cadres, the people, the freedom fighters decide who will take his or her place. And there should be ongoing exams. So there's a lot of little things you can do to maintain the fervor, maintain the momentum. But those are the main things that come to mind. Tito says, what is my thoughts on MMT? I don't know what you mean by MMT. What is that? What was your experience working with 1199C program? What's the 1199C program? The union? Well, I was a member of the 1199 union, which was my first labor union, and I think that my main problem with the union is they didn't do enough education of labor history. People think that unions are there to make sure your benefits are secure, deal with any issues with management, but the purpose of union was to take over the means of production. It was a gradual subordination of the management and ownership class. That's what was the purpose of a labor union. It was not to make sure you can squeeze as much of your wealth that the owner appropriated from you back into your own hands. So I think that if I had any authority in that union, which I didn't, I would have ongoing labor education of the history of labor and the status of labor, and I would have ongoing attempt to subvert the management class. All right, we're getting a little short on time. It's because I have to wrap this up at 9, no later than 9. What do you think of revolutionary African-centered consciousness as a continuation of Steve Biko's Black consciousness? I think that it is. I think that we should build on it, but I absolutely think that it is. Easy question. Thank you. Okay, how a half Jew in love with Anglo-Saxons? I don't know who you're referring to. How boardroom bully? I don't know who you're referring to or what you're referring to. Mbelu, it's not tribalism, it's colonial inspired ethnic supremacism. Okay, yeah, that's that. But tribalism kind of is easier to say, but yeah, you're right. How do we get off the train in the colonial powers put us on? Through the way we get, Mbelu say, how do we get off the train the colonial powers put us on? First, let me tell you where this train is going. Western colonialism and industrial capitalism is bringing us to a state that is destroying the life-sustaining capacity of the planet Earth. Mass extinction, climate disruption, massive crop failures and biosystems and ecosystem collapse. it's leading us to omnicide, meaning the death of everything. Pollution as deep as the Mariana Trench up into the atmosphere, pollution. So how do we stop? What we have to do is first, we need internal and external revolution. We need to dismantle the systems and institutions of global white domination and capitalism, meaning the global monetary system, the global banking system, the military, the nuclear infrastructure, the modern economic infrastructure, the extraction economy, industrialized farming. All of those systems have to be dismantled. Even the borders of Africa, they have to be redrawn. The borders of the New World, the so-called the Americas, need to be redrawn. So the only way to do this is not just to free an African nation or free African people or free the African continent. We have to, this is a planetary thing. From Antarctica to the North Pole and every point in between. And even the moon, they didn't went up to the moon and Mars and polluted that shit. So we cannot simply, a lot of times this is another thing, I don't like saying this, but it's a level of truth to it. Black people have never been denied anything we're willing to organize and fight for. Our problem is that we often fight for the wrong things. So we need to retake the world. That's the only solution. That's the only way to stop the colonial powers. It's not even about securing peace with Europe or peace with the West or peace with the Americas or peace with the capitalists. You can't, because peace to them is preparation for war. They're at war or preparing for war. They don't understand peace. But let's say the United States and Europe in neo-colonialism. Let's say China brings back all of its forces and stops the exploitation. Even if you're in the United States, Europe, and China fucking with nuclear bombs and nuclear energy and all that fucking omnicidal technology, ethno-specific biological weapons and all that shit, this insidious AI. The pollution and waste and fallout from that shit does not recognize borders. And this planet is a fishbowl. So if I'm doing something in Canada, eventually it's going to be in Brazil. If I'm doing something in Brazil, eventually it's going to end up in Zimbabwe. It's a cycle. The dioxin coming out of the coal plants in the Carolinas and coal country, Appalachia, the dioxin that's being emitted through the coal plants there is ending up in the breast milk of women in Indonesia and Thailand and Ethiopia. So we need a planetary struggle, and it has to be complete. It has to be absolute. It can't be periodic. It can't be, and the only way to keep this momentum going is constant ongoing education. It's not enough to teach someone how to fight or even inspire someone to fight. You have to educate them. That's why a lot of times I get upset about people who degrade the intellectual component. Del Jones said 90% of warfare is culture. The only 10% is actual fighting. And in culture is your intellectual development, your scholarship, your analysis. So you can have the greatest fighter in the world who gets defeated by someone who is properly organized, properly planned, and properly executes their thoughts. So, I hope that answers your question. Someone, I don't know how to pronounce. Hypagogia asks, what would be the ideal conditions for us to free ourselves from the global omnicidal systems, as well as subvert it? Or are we fucked? The ideal conditions, we're in the ideal conditions. Never in a time have we had black people with the level of military, academic, technical, medical skills. We got more black doctors now, more black scholars, more black people who understand everything from agriculture to mechanics right now. These are the ideal conditions. So what we're lacking is the will and the consciousness. So that's our biggest thing. We still have black millionaires going to a fucking overt racist saying, what's your agenda for black folks? It's like a Jew going to Hitler saying, what's your agenda for Jews? And people keep saying Biden doesn't have an agenda. Biden has a fucking black agenda that he's been imposing on us for the last 40 years. You know, that's like if I beat my wife and after 20 years of beating my wife, she was like, well, what are your intentions in this relationship? To beat your ass. You know, like, why do we have to ask somebody? Because even if he came up and said reparations tomorrow, the proof ain't in the pudding. Fuck what you say. Look at what he done. He has a black agenda that he's well articulated and has been executing flawlessly. But I digress. That ain't what you asked me. Let me go back. So we're in good conditions, but what the real need is we need to realize the necessity for revolution, develop the will or desire for revolution, and then simply execute revolution. Because we have all the material things, but they're all dispersed. We need to pool and coordinate our collective talent and resources, and this shit will be over tomorrow. That's why they invest so much into psychological cultural warfare. So that's the answer that I have. These are the perfect conditions. The system of white domination has never been so greatly delegitimized. DJ says, respond, LeBron's son, talk about how miscegenation that's starting in the U.S. happening in UK. How is there still a one-drop rule there instead of pass for white? Meghan Markle found out. I guess. I don't think that was a question. That was a statement. Do you read any scientific books or studies? If so, what subjects? Yeah, I do. I read a lot about because I fight because I'm a atheist. So I like to read about books about the cosmos and evolution and evolutionary development. I also like to read about technology. I read some articles about the developing artificial intelligence and robotics, especially, and I read about military science and military technology and weaponry, from time to time. So that's what. Almost 40 people in the chat with 6 likes. Hey, that's how it be. But I appreciate the shout out. RWP says, Dr. Amos Wilson always pointed out that we have more black educated and still looking for people to set the agenda. Yeah, we have several agendas on the table. We have 100-year-old agendas. We have Garvey. I mean, in more recent, who's fallen out of favor with me. I'm so disappointed, if not disgusted, with Dr. Claude Anderson. But I mean, his powernomics, I don't agree with it, but there's too many black agendas. We just have to figure out which one. We got Kwame Nkrumah laid out a detailed Oba Tashaka. We have so many, not just agendas, but techniques, methodologies, strategies, and tactics. It's there. It's laying around. I have bookshelves full of agendas. But and I've tried to implement and execute some. So we're not for lack of a back agenda. It's for lack of will to execute it and coordination and stick-to-itiveness for a black agenda. What are my positive takeaways from the disruption in Minneapolis? To be honest, Chauncey, I don't really have any. I mean, been there, done that. We've had rebellions. We've had urban uprisings and rebellions. I mean, I participated. The riot I participated in was the Rodney King riots in '92. I graduated high school, and I was in New York, and we took to the streets after the Rodney King book was read. And it's just, I guess I got to be honest. If people gonna hate me, shit, But the ultimate outcome of our responses to police atrocities is generating more overtime for the police. That's been mostly the long-term outcome. Many of these police who commit these crimes that are fired or even prosecuted, they go on to wealth. Like the four cops that beat Rodney King, they went to jail for a short period of time and they went out to do security consultant and other enterprises, and they're much wealthier now. Darren Wilson is also a millionaire uh, who killed Mike Brown. So um, it's reactionary. It's reactionary. And these periodic, the system is well equipped to handle periodic outbursts. It's formed since the 60s. They because remember the SWAT teams are brand new. SWAT teams are relatively new. I mean, within my lifetime, I think they came out in the 70s. They had the first SWAT teams and emergency response teams, and then in in the 90s with the omnibus crime bill, that's when they started giving military grade equipment to and then the terrorism and homeland security. So the system is well prepared for periodic outbursts. And then when you have a riot and uprising, and then the federal government comes in, and it's disaster capitalism to promote. That's nothing but localized disaster capitalism. We can't just do this cycle of atrocity, uprising, reconciliation, repeat. Atrocity, uprising, reconciliation, repeat. Atrocity, up. We don't have it. We're wasting too many lives. I mean, we got brothers that were fighting in Ferguson who got locked up, whose lives were ruined, and we don't even. So the brothers that take this action, there's a brother that just got arrested in New York because when he heard about the latest police atrocity, the brother took to the streets to hunt the police. And he attacked police on 2 separate occasions, and they took him into custody. And they might even charge him with domestic terrorism, you know. And when you get charged, you get asset forfeiture. So they don't just arrest that brother; they can go after his mama's assets, his wife, and so what we need is sustained, coordinated response, not uprising and back to sleep. We should be in a perpetual state of readiness, uprising, and revolution. There should be protocols, but because we know it's going to happen again. So we have to make what Kwame Ture said. Whenever we have these conditions, this back and forth, we have to come up with responses that do maximum damage to them with minimum damage to us. And in the last Q&A, I talked about asymmetrical tactics and asymmetrical attacks we could level against, not because this isn't the police. This isn't the police. This goes all the way from them crackers when they were in kindergarten. This is the media system, the educational system, the religious value system, the economic system and incentive and economic incentives, the governing system, the culture. This cop didn't just become a racist when he was a cop. His authority doesn't come from the police. There's an authority the police don't equip themselves. The police don't even write their own rules of engagements and policies and protocol. There's levels above that police. And so many different industries that feed into and fund. Just like our black people are out here buying Nikes and Under Armour. Under Armour makes police tactical boots. And they give the police tactical boots at discount. So black kids buying Jordans are subsidizing the police and their discounted and tax deductible boots that they're using to stomp on our fucking necks. So we can come at it at that angle. But I mean, busting windows, I mean, if it's a good relief, I have no tears to cry for any broken windows and burnt down cities. I mean, go if that's your thing. But I think we'll go right back to the status quo and we'll go back to sleep until the next atrocity gets televised. So, what time is it? Oh, we're already a little over, but I'll try to ride a little bit. I haven't taken any questions from Facebook, and I'm sorry. Excuse me. Let's see. I'm gonna look on Facebook because I think I've neglected Facebook. That ain't cool. I don't want to be like that. Facebook, as Cleopatra Jones calls it, the blue ghetto. Oh, Facebook is such trash. But what I do? What I do? We have to use the enemy's weapons to tear down his house or something like that. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna try to find a question for YouTube. Oh, but it's not letting me access the Facebook since. Uh, I can't access. I'm sorry about Facebook. I kind of left foot, but let's go back to YouTube. Sorry, y'all. Um, Mbilu asks, why would Kwame Nkrumah make a Pan-African movement that included Arabs, black, white, and mixed, who enslaved us before the Europeans? The reason why is because Kwame Nkrumah was a statesman. He was a statesman and a bureaucrat. So he was being pragmatic. He married an Arab woman because he wanted to two things. He wanted to unite the African continent as well as cut off the colonial powers from Africa's resources. So he accepted that the North was under Arab control, occupation, colonization, and control. But he did not conclude that he could give sustained opposition to the Arabs at the same time fighting the colonial powers of the West. So what he did was he went up there to Nasser and says, listen, I want to unite the African continent. The Arabs are entrenched, been here since the 6th century. So let us create an African coalition for all people who are on the African continent to purge the outsiders. Now, let's say if that was successful, and the Arabs sold him out, of course, but let's say that was successful. Would he have then embarked on a de-Arabization, de-Islamification of Africa after they had secured the purging of Western colonial powers? From what I've read about Nkrumah, revolutionary warfare, I think he might have. So, but the reason he did that is because he was trying to govern a nation and create a transcontinental movement. And so he made a lot of compromises. They obviously didn't pan out. They obviously failed miserably. He's not a failure, but his larger agenda, of course, we're still fighting that fight. So I wouldn't have done it. If I was his advisor, I would have advised against it, but I can't say that I don't understand it and I don't hold it against him. I don't hold a failed conclusion or a failed tactic if it was done for the right reason. Because if we failed, then there's lessons to be taken from that. So I don't think we need to have resentment for Nkrumah or to disgrace Nkrumah for his failed tactic. But I think we need to learn that lesson that he was wrong in that. But he was right about a lot of shit. So, can't have it all. Bro.Diallo, I mean, I've been wrong about a lot of shit. I'm going to be wrong about shit. Don't hold it against me because no matter what, I'm steadfast in my ultimate agenda. And, as far as, I would never trade in Dr. Mingo for an Arab wife to appease. I think that was a bad mistake. Really bad mistake. But then again, Gaddafi turned around and tried to do the same thing. That Nkrumah did with African currency and uniting the North and the Central Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. And again, that's why he had to be taken out. See, we talk all kind of shit about Pan-Africanism and Hoteps, but nothing keeps them up, the oppressors up at night, more than movement. You can talk Pan-Africanism, but every time we move, that's why when we construct Pan-African agendas, we have to construct our agendas. Read George Jackson, Blood in My Eye. Read Guerrilla Warfare by Ernesto Che Guevara, because they said anything you construct under the system of oppression, you need to construct it to withstand the counterattack. This is the right thing to do. Let's build black businesses. You can't build black socialist economic infrastructure without embedded within that structure the counteroffensive for when they try to subvert it. But yeah. So yeah, I don't think he should have done it, but I understand that's my conclusion as to why he did it. And it's not just my conclusion, it's stated, it's written. You can read it. That's why he took on an Egyptian wife. He was trying to, merge all the people present in Africa. And remember, back in his day, there was strong Arab anti-colonial movements. Remember, Frantz Fanon was working with the Arabs in Algeria to kick out the French. So our understanding of the Arab presence in Africa was slightly different than back in the decolonial era of the 60s. You know, I think he was on some lesser evil shit, but yes, it was unfortunate. But don't hold it against him too hard. It's better to not resent him for that mistake, but learn from that mistake. Let's say, I left the Blue Ghetto to ask my question here. What is the protocol to be implemented? Man, shit. Now, it's 9/11. I was supposed to stop at 9. Okay, I've done several videos on that. But the protocols for implementing Pan-African revolution is first that it has to be academic, strong academic. There has to be ongoing research, ongoing critical, radical analysis, and ongoing engagement and discourse about how how to establish how it is proceeded. A lot of times there is a strong vein of anti-intellectualism embedded within the Black liberation struggle. I ain't with all that talk. I'm about action. And that is a slave mentality. The African man and woman was brought into a strong body, weak mind paradigm where we respect other Black people for what they can do as opposed to what they can. I've been to, and I say this all the time, I've been to lectures to see. I was fortunate enough, I'm old enough to when Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark were around, when I was in college in New York, they were giving free lectures. Professor William Mackey and these brothers, I would go see them giving lectures and insights above anything for free to the Black masses. And they were giving better information, better anything you can get at fucking NLU or no, NYU, at Harvard, and all these other elite colleges. They were given better insights and intellectual stimulation. And inevitably, somebody would sit up in that lecture and say, well, you're doing all that talking. What are you doing? You talking about the pyramids. We need to build one. I've also been to see people like Christian Parenti and other European scholars get up and jawbone for hours. And not one white person will get up and be like, you're doing all that talking. What are you going to do? So there has been a devaluation of the intellectual work. Or a brother can come on and say, well, I've done this research, I've done this analysis, and I make this information available to the community. And people will be like, ho hum. But a brother come home and they're like, I spent 10 hours on the rail yard, old John Henry. And people are like, right, strong Black men. So we are an intellectual people. I mean, the Sankara, Timbuktu, Egypt, everywhere you look, you see the strong intellectual legacy of African people. But then we are, I work hard, I grind, I hustle. So one of the protocols is we have to appreciate and have an unrelenting appreciation and advancement of the intellectual, scholarly element of the Black liberation struggle. Philosophical, ideological, conceptual, vision. Secondly, the protocol is, I didn't hear you. What'd you say? Oh, sorry. The next protocol is secular. Our movements must be absolutely unapologetically secular. And when I say secular, I'm not just talking about Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Mormonism. Our movement must even shun, and I know y'all, this is going to hurt some of y'all, that Kimite, Kemetic, supernatural elements coming out of Africa and Vodun and rituals. I'm not even comfortable anymore with pouring libations when I go to these meetings. And I know some of y'all, our movement must be aggressively secular because there's room. Like the last time I went to an event, it was a wonderful event, but this one thing where it wasn't the last event I went to, but the last time like it was prominent, it was Dr. Obari Cartman invited me out to speak. And before we began, we pour libations. And people, first they start off to Ma'at, to Yemaya, to the ancestors, to Malcolm X, and then somebody's like, I pour libations for Jesus. Somebody poured libations for Bill Cosby and wanted to, send out positive energy to Bill Cosby. So let's just, and so before we could even get into the fucking what we're there to do with the issues on South Side of Chicago and the violence young black males perpetuate against the larger community, before we could even get into that, We fucking debating Bill Cosby, whether or not Bill Cosby or which Jesus, Black Jesus, or Jesus was and what's Jesus' real name? So the shit got to be secular, and the reason why is that because anything that comes on the table in terms of will advance revolution, this will not. It has to be something that is material, that can be critiqued, deconstructed, that has mass, has weight, can be verified or delegitimized. But when you're dealing with ethereal shit, you can't you can debate it from anywhere. Like I said, we could debate. My son came to me the other day and said Sentry, which is if you don't know who Sentry is, look up Marvel Comics Sentry, whether Sentry was more powerful than Superman. And Superman's vulnerability to magic, how could Sentry exploit Superman's vulnerability to magic and Krypton? Or would we have to leave Kryptonite out of the debate because then that creates too much lopside? You can debate that shit forever. You can debate that shit till kingdom come, and there's no hard evidence. But even if you want to do some type like, can Muhammad Ali is a better boxer than Mike Tyson? These are real men of flesh. We can look at their stats, we can look at their ability, and we can come to some conclusion. But you can never come to any type of conclusion dealing with whether or not Jesus or Cosby and the ancestor, will Cosby be an ancestor when he dies, or will he, So I've perhaps said too much. But our movements must be intellectual and have a high value on intellectualism and intellectualizing and the philosophical elements of the struggle. Because when you have a revolution that lacks the philosophical, leftist, revolutionary, radical mind, intellectual work, a lot of times the revolutionaries become tyrants like Mugabe. Mugabe was a Roman Catholic his whole life. And the whole time, everybody's like, yeah, Mugabe kicking the white man out, blah, 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 retaking the land. And I continue to digress. So, 1, intellectual. 2, secular. Unrelentingly secular. 3, global. You must always maintain. You can never, ever get so comfortable. You can work locally. You can work regionally. You can work nationally. But if your local work does not have global ties, you always have to say, how does this affect Africans on the global scale? Also, that's another one. I'm going to run out of time. Another one, I can't really go into each one into great detail, but maybe sometime. Another one is multi-generational. Every movement we construct must be multi-generational, meaning that the work we start is not saying, well, we're going to do this work and then we're going to enjoy all of the rewards from this labor. You must construct the movement and the struggle so that any generation, whether it's 10 years later or 100 years later, can inherit and move. What? Oh, okay. Tell your mom to be done in a second. Is she even, what's she doing? Oh. Okay. So, sorry. Everybody roaming around trying to eavesdrop on my business. Anyway, so it must be a multi-generational study. So those are some protocols or some fundamental values that must be a part of your movement, whether you're trying to teach food resiliency, whether you're trying to organize military campaigns against fascists, whatever you're trying to do in terms of revolution, those are elements that transcend. Whether you're trying to awaken and educate Black people, or you're trying to equip them and arm them for direct confrontation or guerrilla warfare, those translate in all. So the protocols have to be applicable across the board. And then they're saying, like I said, if you're doing guerrilla warfare versus whether you're doing food sovereignty and food resiliency, or whether you're doing cultural work and archaeological work or philosophical work, a lot of all those areas of the Black liberation struggle require different skill sets and different prioritization, but the protocols have to be applicable across the board. But those are just a few. I mean, literally, there could be hundreds. Protocols of the learned elders of Black liberation. We're okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, pouring libations to Bill Cosby. I almost flipped over the table. Okay, Veronica says, I also enjoyed your book review of Del Jones. I'm interested in him and when and how did he pass away? Well, Del Jones, I have to look at the year. It's I just don't want to get the year wrong. I said when he passed in the well, I know how he passed away though. see. Wow. His obituary. Oh, see, y'all gonna make me cry. No, that's not the right one. Anyway, Dale Jones passed because of congestive heart failure. Um, he uh, he sorry, he was actually put on the heart transplant list for a heart transplant, and it was in the early 2000s. Wow, I can't believe it. It's just but it was in the early 2000s. But he was put on the heart transplant list, and so I think 2002, because my wife had just spoke to him. Yeah, 2002. He passed away in 2002. Sorry, but he had heart issues, and in fact, his wife at the time, Sister Q Quarindon, had put him on a vegan holistic diet, and he started working on it. But he was a portly dude. I remember when Dale Jones came to our vegan cafe at our bookstore. When he came in there, and we told him, don't eat anything. We're going to prepare food for you. And we prepared a vegan feast for Dale Jones. And he walked in there, and he was with his son and his wife, and he sat at the table and looked at us like we were crazy. I mean, this is a brother from Philadelphia from the 70s. So he was gracious. He ate the food, but I could tell him and his son were like, when we going to get out of here and get some real food? So he was an eater. He liked his swine and his I don't know if he ate pork, but he definitely liked his barbecue and his Philly cheesesteaks, and he was a Philadelphia guy. But he was from that era of the movement. Remember in the 60s, you had the Age of Aquarius, the awakening. So a lot of political brothers were looking at other brothers. There was this divergence in the black consciousness community where you had brothers like from the Panthers. And if you look at the old documentaries of the Black Panthers and you look at interviews of George Jackson or even Dale Jones and brothers from that era, you'll find they smoking cigarettes and they eating the brothers down south eating hog mogs and chitlins and scrapple. And then you had the ethereal brothers, the brothers that were black hippies, and they were burning incense and doing chants and playing drums, and they also were into the holistic health and natural healing and meditation. And so the brothers, they're both on the leftist, but did I go left? Yeah, they're both leftists, but the conscious revolutionary militant brothers saw that as escapism. So not only when they rejected the peace, hippie, let love rule element of the struggle, they also shunned health, yoga, exercise, and fitness, and awareness and centeredness of body and mind. And they were like, no, we're going to take these shotguns to the streets. And the brothers that were like health and wellness and all that were like, they shunned the shotguns and all the negative energy. So there was that divergence. And you'll find a lot of brothers who became active in the 60s. Even now, I know some OG revolutionaries, old guerrillas, OG revolutionaries, freedom fighters, that even to this day, when I was working with the National Black United Front, and people like Samori and a lot of the older cats who are my elders, they were like, and I'm like, well, I'm a vegan, and we want to do a community walk or a community bike ride. They'd be like, man, ain't nobody got time for that shit, that old hippie shit. And they smoke, Samori, I had to sit in his office and he's smoking a pipe, and he smokes his cigars and a lot of stuff. So Dale Jones was from that era. And unfortunately, he did eventually awaken, which I think did extend his life, but it couldn't undo the damage of a lifetime of, So his wife got him on a holistic diet. His wife actually wrote a book, Sister Q, Maintaining Our Temples. I might do a review of that. I have a copy of it, an autographed copy of that Dale Jones gave me. That's Maintaining Our Temples. And so she went on in his name, after seeing what he went through, went on to teach and try to help other people from that faith. But anyway, it was really unfortunate because Dale had just bought land in Ghana and was going to build a home and a center in Ghana. And make his pilgrimage back to Africa and live out his last days working and organizing on the continent. And he passed away while he and his current wife were in that planning stage. So it was really unfortunate. But I know he has some type of congenital or chronic heart disease. At one point, someone said he was sick, but was looking to get a heart transplant, but he just couldn't hold on long enough to get a donor. So, and that, I believe it was 2002. Don't quote me on that, but um, that's that with Del Jones. But we keep his legacy going. The war correspondent. Many my family is turning white. I don't know what to do. Don't do shit. Hey, Sunshine says many people in my family are turning white. Don't do nothing. Just what's that serenity prayer? Accept the things you cannot change. So like Del Jones had actually. Did somebody get the phone? Del Jones had actually said he had children that. Now I ain't saying no names, but Del Jones said he went to his son's wedding and there was no Africa in the wedding. That he had brought his son up in the movement, that his son sat on the lap of revolutionaries and had been embedded in the struggle since birth. He had worked with his son and enlightened his son, woody woo woo. And he said, but when his son became an adult, he totally abandoned the movement. So his son calls him and is like, Dad, I'm having a wedding. And he was expecting to have some African cultural elements, but he said they were jumping over the broom and throwing garter belts, and it was a Eurocentric Christian wedding. And he said, I didn't get, and my wife and I say this all the time. We quote him for different reasons. It's like, I couldn't get no Africa in that wedding. He said, but as for me, I represented Africa. He said, I did everything I knew to do for my son in terms of his consciousness and his development. But, I held down. I held the square. So that's what you have to do. You have to represent. I mean, and for years, like, I don't have an issue with my family in terms of their black identity. My family's too damn black. My family is black, but they ain't trying to hear this vegan stuff. They're not trying to hear this holistic stuff. So it's been many a gatherings I have to come, whether it's barbecues and various family celebrations. Like one time I went over to my uncle's house and he literally had seeds. He had seeds and berries. Like people joke and be like, oh, y'all vegans, y'all only eat seeds and berries. And we went and there was a whole platter. My wife can tell you, my uncle had barbecue, whole briskets and rack of ribs. And he was like, don't you bring nothing this time. I got something for you. And it was literally seeds and berries. And when y'all thinking, oh, he had some apples and some oranges. No. When I say strawberries and elderberries and blackberries and sesame seeds, not even peanut. I'm not exaggerating, like peanuts and almonds and maybe an apple and an orange, a plum, a mango. No, he had seeds and berries. And what really embarrassed me, because I tried to be strong, like, nah, I'm not gonna live this stereotype. But me and my wife and my kids, we tore them seeds and berries up. They were fresh and plump. So even though I can't get my family to go vegan, I'm going to represent veganism. And I have some relatives. Shout out to my cousin Eric. He and his wife just went vegan. Who else? I got another cousin. I think she said she's going pescatarian, but she's moving away from the flesh of dead animals. So it's happening. It's happening. I got my grandmother for some time to not only adopt a plant-based diet, but she also, did some reversed her type 2 diabetes for some time. So you hold down your square. You love your people. You embrace your people. You be there. Don't isolate yourself from your people. I could never be like, well, my family's full of meat-eating Christians, and I'm so much better than them. Just because I'm better than them don't mean I can't be family with them. So, don't trip. Don't trip. That's all I gotta say. Don't trip. Be there. Be with your people. Enjoy the company of your people. And if they ever come to you and be like, "Why you on this stuff?" Be able to be articulate, be loving. Show them the joy and the pleasure, of being conscious and pro-black and all that shit. Don't be miserable and distant. You are the advocate. And when you got a vegan in the family, then you represent all vegans. When you got a conscious person, you represent all conscious people. So anything that goes wrong with you is the whole thing. So you representing us amongst your family. And you got to, even if you're many people in your family are off on some bullshit, you got nieces, nephews, cousins, and people looking and watching and listening to you that you don't even know. I've had that many times. I had little cousins and nephews come to me like, yo, I was watching you. And sometimes you'll have elders and uncle come like, even though I think you're on some bullshit, I respect how well you carry your bullshit. But don't get in the business of trying to dictate to your relatives. Don't get into that or being too judgmental. You and one other bit of wisdom. There's a difference between family and relatives. And you should have protocol for relatives and protocol for family. Family, like Chauncey, is my family. Family are people who hold common cause, common agenda, common ideology. You commune. Relatives are people that you are related to, that you have obligations. So you got family relatives and relative family. And so if my family calls, like I'm in a spot and a relative calls, I have to deal with family first and take care of family first. I don't want to sound like an evangelical family first. I mean ideological, revolutionary family first. So there's a difference between family and relatives too. So you can take that if your family's fucking up, then just put them in the relative box and keep it moving. Marlene, I'm so sick of ignorance around veganism. I'm in a Facebook group. I can't be vegan because I'm allergic to soy. I get, yeah, that's silly. I'm sick of the soy hysteria. I've been waiting to develop my boobs for 20 years. I've been on the soy milk, tofu, soy sauce. I've been consuming soy unapologetically and consistently for 20. And they ask you this, they talk about soy because it has phyto. And y'all need to go talk to Dita or Charles about this because he loves just breaking down all this phytoestrogen scientific element of soy. But I've been waiting to develop breasts. And let me tell you, let's just lay it out. The men we see out here with gynomastia, and gynomastia is the technical term for man boobs, with big hips and big jiggly butts. The men you see with the grandma figures, 9 times out of 9 times, they're meat and dairy consumers, not vegan. Come on now, come on. I know more vegans than I care to know. I know mostly vegans. We all go to the same spot. We all go to the same ritual, Illuminati rituals together. I know so many vegans. And not one of them I know, got them. So I don't know. I've been waiting to be effeminized by soy all my life. I'm a big fan of breasts. So if I could get my own pair, I wouldn't have to harass my wife so much. Now, let me stop. She gets mad when I say silly stuff. All right, y'all. Let's wrap this up. Okay, Phil been on soy for 20 years, and he claims he got rock hard abdomen and ain't done a sit. Okay, ladies, Phil out here trying to catch. So, ladies, you can inbox Phil. He's got rock hard abs. He's trying to act like he's trying to do a testimony for veganism, but he really out here trying to holler. Go ahead, get you one, Phil. Some beautiful sisters, conscious sisters in the feed. Go for it, man. I ain't gonna get in your way. My abs ain't as hard as they used to be, but it don't matter. I'm off the table, man. I'm trapped. See, this is when I gotta stop for Dr. Mingo come up the stairs and start looking at me crazy. Anyway, it's been a great time. Please go back. I only have a few views. Like I said, every time Umar get on here, that's why I need to start doing some Umar shit so I can get. I ain't jealous, but okay, I'm gonna start doing Umar shit. I gotta go find a raggedy ass public park to do these videos in. And I'm gonna do some of that chewing. I can sip. I can do some sipping, up close lip sip. See, Bro.Diallo, I don't know what y'all into. I don't know, I don't know what y'all into. Cause I don't be getting the love. I think I work to put this shit together. But anyway, let me stop complaining before I lose what little support I got. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. Sorry, Facebook. Next time we do a Q&A, I promise you I'm gonna focus a little bit more on Facebook feed. But no, I don't want y'all to leave. So I'm gonna be more balanced. But I was having trouble pulling up the questions on Facebook. So I'm not player hating on the Blue Ghetto. It's just I couldn't pull up the questions from Facebook. But I guess that's it. This week, go subscribe. turn on notifications. We did Del Jones, Culture Bandits. We're going to do Culture Bandits Volume 2. You can see all the notes I'm making. We're going to do a review of this book. This book, man, if you liked the Del Jones Culture Bandits 2, then we're going to do Sex Prisoner, Culture Bandits 3. If I ever get my For Blacks Only book of Del Jones, which is the only Del Jones book I don't have, I bought it, and it was autographed by Del Jones, and I loaned it out, and it's in Brooklyn, New York, somewhere. One of you Timberland wearing ass suckers got my book, and I know who you is. Anyway, I'll see y'all. I'm gonna try to have the Bro.Diallo, and I'm gonna be doing book reviews. If y'all receptive to the book reviews, we can do movie reviews and reviews of other things. If y'all into reviews, I got a lot of strong, accurate, perfect opinions about a lot of things. So we'll start off with the books. If you have titles or authors, shout out to Chauncey. I did get the book, This Bastard of a Life. And I can't wait to get into that. But now, since I'm doing these reviews, so that's my summer reading. And if y'all want to do reviews of nonfiction, I do read some nonfiction. Octavia Butler and shit. So if y'all want to do some nonfiction, we can also do nonfiction book reviews as well. So it's up to y'all. Chicago is opening up Friday, so hopefully sooner than later, I'm going to call Q4 Radio, and the Bro.Diallo live broadcast will be back. We ain't forgot about y'all. I hope y'all ain't forgot about us. Shout out to Q4 Radio. It's one of many other community progressive leftist institutions that's struggling under the quarantine. But anyway, I appreciate y'all being with me. Again, I'm sorry to Facebook that I couldn't get to y'all thing. And there's a news flash. Ron says that there's no, we got to stop saying riot. It's a rebellion. No more riot talk. We don't riot. White folks riot for quarantine. White folks riot after football games and shit, and college campus riots. We rebel. Oppressed people don't riot. Oppressed people rebel. So he says, newsflash, there's a riot. Nope. Rebellion on LA Freeway right now. So I'm going to look into that when I get offline. Y'all be safe there. And I will see you guys. I'll see you guys. I'll post that. Hopefully we can get it up by Friday, the video for Del Jones, and then we'll try to do another live or a broadcast for Monday. So until then, but I can't leave without my outro music. Until then, oh my God, there we go. Until then, I'll see you guys soon. Be safe. And again, if I missed your questions, you can go to my Tumblr and you can post a question there, and I'll answer the question via the Tumblr Q&A section. And again, I apologize if I missed your question. Oh, it's hot. Why am I sweating up here? Trying to turn my AC. Let me do a quick commercial. Check out local Kansas City hip hop legend, The Popper, and Popperfield. He just dropped an album. You can go to imkc.com to check out the album and to get your IMKC gear. I should have on my IMKC Prospect shirt. Represent the hood, helping to independent Black economic revitalization. Black folks ain't waiting for the Democrats to have an agenda. They coming up and executing our own independent agenda. Also, AfricanWorldOrder.com. You can get your official Bro.Diallo merch and aesthetics of liberation to go help fund and sustain our efforts here and abroad. So AfricanWorldOrder.com is live. I'm KC, Copperfield, anything else. Anyhow, okay, next time, whatever info or announcements, I should do announcements first, but whatever. I said it. That's what I meant to say, and I said it. I'll see y'all Friday, Monday.